The anime starts in 1897 AD, in Tokyo, in an era called Meiji. But it is different from reality. And there is a fight between a young man and a monster inside a cage. And the place is like fighting and betting arenas. And there are many people watching the fighting between the young man who claims to be the demon slayer and that monster. And this young man can overcome the monster, and the audience encourages him and applauds him. After that, he leaves the ring, and the sponsor of those fights comes behind him and congratulates him on his victory. And the young man asks him what kind of monster it is and where he got it. And the man tells him that he is a chokera and that he bought it at a cheap price from one of the merchants. After that, he tells him that our offers are not the best, but they have more monsters than anyone in Tokyo, and that their shows will be the most entertaining in the world. And he tells the young man not to think himself a performer, but that he is one of the monsters, and then spit on his face, and the young man leaves him. He doesn't care and goes back to his room and drinks a drink, but he is saved. He suddenly feels that someone is watching him, but he finds no one. After that, he is on his way to buy a drink, and there are some children walking behind him. So he stands and smiles at them, but they are afraid and run away from him. Then he buys the drink and the seller tells him that he looks tired and has to go to the doctor. But the young man does not care and leaves him and goes. And the young man remembers some of his memories, and there is someone who restricts him. But he wakes up from those memories to the sound of people fighting with a cat. And someone tells him, since you are a demon killer, get rid of that monster and kill it. And the young man approaches from the cat and hits it on the nose. The cat scribbles it and runs. After that, he tells them to excuse him because the demon killer can never kill. So people say that he is just a crook, and they leave him and go. And at night, it is ironic, and that young man enters into a fight with the demon cat. But as usual, he can overcome that cat. And on his way back to his room, there is someone watching him, but he can reveal that person and form a girl, and ask her how to serve her because he does not like to be followed by anyone. And he has that girl with a cage for birds, so he approaches to see what is inside. But the girl holds his hand and wraps around him and puts the cage on the ground and takes out her weapon. So she tries to shoot him, but he is faster and throws his souls at her and approaches her quickly and pours the drink inside the gun. So the girl tries to hurt him with the knife on the gun, and they enter into a fight and succeed in kicking him in the face and approach him in order to stab him with the weapon. But he stops him with his foot and can overcome the girl. So the girl tells him that this happened because he tried to touch the bird's cage only, and he has to be careful in the future. So the young man is surprised and does not know whether that girl apologizes or orders him. He approaches her and threatens her, but she tells him that he cannot kill anyone other than the stage. So the young man is surprised by what that girl knows and asks her who she is, and she tells him that she likes him, then congratulates him because he was able to overcome Shizuko. After that, she grabs her weapon and wraps it again and tells him that the rumors she heard about him seem appropriate. So he tells her that she has good ingredients, but she has to talk to the head of his group, and the girl laughs because he thinks she wants to join him. And suddenly she tells him that he doesn't seem to have a long way to live, and that he will die soon even if he still wins in his killers. And she tells him that her words are true, right, hybrid, half phony, half human. And Oni is a being that can kill all the monsters that humans know. But because he is a hybrid, one day he will come and be dominated by the power of the Oni and turn into a monster and die. The young man is surprised by the information she has and asks her who she is and how she knew all that. So she tells him that she came to make an agreement with him, and that she has ways to extend his life. But in return, she will fulfill his wish and approach him and remove the cover from the cage. And there will be the head of a girl who talks and tells him that the wish is to kill me. And she tells him that her name is Rindo Aya, and the girl with her is her maid, and her name is Shizuko. So the young man is surprised, and we are all surprised because who was talking from the beginning is that head that she claims Aya. And the young man thought that Shizuko uses a high belly speaking skill. So he asks her if she is immortal, and she tells him yes. And he is surprised because he thought that the immortals are just legends. And she tells him that she is 947 years old and her age stops at 14 and 3 months. And the young man is shocked by her age and asks her where is the rest of her body. And she tells him that 6 months ago a fool stole what her body was. He tells her that he hears that the immortals can germinate their bodies again, and she tells him that the immortals are powerless in front of only one thing. And the young man tells her that the Oni tells her, and she tells him yes. And the young man tells her that the wounds caused by the Oni do not heal quickly, and he tells her that the Oni can kill her if he cuts them. So how is she still alive? And she tells him that because the Oni is a force that is not complete. The young man concludes that the Oni like him is a hybrid. And she tells him that the Oni hid his face, and what she could see him is the face of his boss, an old man with a stick and a hoarse voice, and he is not Japanese but a foreigner. And she tells him that Shizuko was badly injured, and that she is just ahead now and cannot do much. And since his Oni part began to overcome him, he has the power to kill any monster, even immortals. And at the same time the show ends, and he asks them to change the place so that she is not also part of the show. After that she asks him for his name, and he tells her that his name is Shonichi Tsugaru, after which she tells him that despite his desire to die, he also wants to live. So he tells her to clarify her question. She tells him that whenever he uses his power, the more you have the Oni, which reduces your lifespan, and his continuation of these performances will cause his death soon, which means that you want to die. But you resisted Shizuko even though she is able to kill him. So why do you want to live? And Tsugaru tells her that the Oni will own him after using a lot of his power, and that will happen while he is definitely fighting a monster in one of the shows, which means that he will be surrounded by hateful and bloodthirsty people, and the shepherd and the leader of the group who reaps money too. And certainly they will be the first people to attack and kill after I agitate. Chaos will prevail in the place, and people will flee, but wires and metal doors will prevent them from escaping, and he will be able to kill them all before the police come and kill him. And since his death is approaching, he wants to die while he is having fun. And thus he will rid the world of some of his scum, and it will be a good theatrical show. So he asked the head of the group to include him, and he tries to maintain his strength in order to attract a larger number of audiences. So she tells him that he is strange because he thinks that his life is just a joke. So he tells her that his shows include killing monsters in an entertaining way. So it makes sense to end my life in the same way because he is one of those monsters. After that, she asks him once again, he kills her, and he tells her not to rush. And she tells her that she is too late, and what fun is living all that age while she is just a severed head. But he refuses to kill her, and tells her that he will help her get her body back in exchange for extending his life, and asks her about the location of her body. And she tells her that he thinks he is in Europe. After that he asks Shizuko if she wants her lady to die, and she tells him that she only follows orders, and that her feelings do not matter. And she asks him why he wants to help her and not kill her as she asked. So he tells her that he wants to hit two birds with a stone and nothing more, because the person who stole her body is the one who robbed him of his humanity. And he asks her if the letter M is engraved on his stick, and she tells him yes. He makes sure that he is the same man and tells her that since she has lived for centuries, it means that she is very smart. So with her cunning and strength they can take revenge on the enemy. So Shizuko orders her to take her out of the cage and asks him if he will keep his promise. And Tsugaru tells her for sure. After that, he asks her how she will extend his life, and she tells him that he has to eat part of it. And she tells him that immortal cells are very flexible, and if they enter your body, they will strengthen your human immune side, and you will be able to slow down. So he is surprised that you turn into Oni, and Tsugaru is surprised. He will eat a part of it, and she tells him that it is definitely her eyes or her brain, but he will eat the parts that she can give up. That is, the fluids of her body, tears, mucus, sweat, or saliva, and she tells him that it is rare when she cries or sweats, and she asks him what he wants, mucus or saliva, and he tells her saliva, and he holds her to kiss her and drink from her saliva. After that, we move to 1898. In eastern France, there is a vampire man hunting a deer, but he did not succeed in hitting it with a gun. So he leaves it and hunts it with his hand, then returns to his son, and his son asks him why he took the trouble to bring it if he was not going to use it. And his father tells him that he could not injure it. So he tells him that the mayor is kind and sent it. At least I had to try it. And using these things gives a good impression of understanding with humans. But the boy is objecting to his father's words, and tells him that a vampire hunter attacked them. but the father tells him that they should all get along with humans, whether they like it or not. And then they go home, and his son asks him to get rid of the hunter's weapon, which is made of silver. And his father tells him no, and that keeping it will be safer. And on his way to the store, he finds the lock broken. When he entered the store, he found the hunter's weapon stained with vampire blood. Then he called the rest of the family to check on them. Then he ran to check on his wife, and found her killed and soaked in blood. After that, the press came to meet the husband, who claims Mr. Goddard, to find out the details of the investigation into the murder of his wife. But Mr. Goddard refused to talk to them. But he was stopped by a young girl who is also a journalist, and he asked her how old she is, and she told him that she is Annie Kerber, 14 years old, and asked him about the details of the case. He tells her that the investigation into the case has stopped, that he has not drunk a drop of human blood in more than 20 years, that he and his family go to church every Sunday evening, and in the end, is this a treatment we deserve? And she tells him that I mean that there is discrimination against vampires who are allies of humans, and he tells him yes, and she should be careful to write Mr. Goddard's strong displeasure with how the police handled the incident, and then ask him how he will get to the truth then, and he tells her that he appoints a private detective, and he hears about a couple in the East who specialize in monster cases, and the girl asks him if he means Aya Rindo and Tsugaru Shonichi, and he tells her yes, this duo. After that, we move to Aya and Tsugaru, and they form a team to investigate the cases of monsters until they reach the old man who stole Aya's body, and they are on their way to Mr. Goddard to solve the case of his wife's killers, and we get to know the members of Mr. Goddard's family, namely, the eldest son Claude, the middle son Raul, the youngest daughter Charlotte, and the servants Alfred and Giselle, who are humans. After that, our team arrives at Mr. Goddard's mansion. Then Mr. Goddard receives them, and Tsugaru introduces himself to Mr. Goddard. Then Mr. Goddard tells him that he heard that he specializes in monster issues, and Tsugaru tells him that he is just a student, and his teacher is the one who takes care of the real work. But whatever she says, she does not remember that she took him as a student, and that you are only my assistant. But Mr. Goddard looks at Shizuko and thinks she is the one who is talking. Then she says that despite her physical condition, she will have no problem solving this case, and that she will track down the killer who killed his wife. After that, Shizuko orders to move the bags with the servant Alfred to their room. After that, Mr. Goddard asks, since she is the maid, where is Aya Rindo? She tells Aya to Tsugaru to remove the cover. Everyone is surprised by what they saw, so they ask her how she is still alive, and she tells them that she lost her body about a year ago, and tells them that she loves watching the expressions of everyone when they see her for the first time. Then she asks Mr. Goddard how he found the body, and he tells them what happened. Then she asks him how many people live in the palace, and he tells her that except for his murdered wife Hannah, they are a family of 4 members and servants, and she tells him that she knew that his wife was a human, and Mr. Goddard tells her that it is true. Then Aya and Tsugaru go to inspect the scene of the crime. And then you notice from the picture of the body that her expressions are peaceful. His wife, Hannah, was asleep at the time, and he would say yes, which is also a reason why we didn't hear her screaming, and then she would go on to check the place. Then she asks Mr. Goddard about the silver stake, and if the hunter who had it puts it inside a pot. And Mr. Goddard tells her no, and that he was holding it in his hand. And then she tells him that she heard that vampires burn when they touch silver or holy water. And Mr. Goddard tells her that he just almost burned his hand as soon as his hand approached the silver stake. And the regenerative power of vampires does not work when they are injured, and it may take recovery from a simple burn a whole week. So he asked Alfred to take the stake from the hunter, and then ask him who had the keys to the store. Mr. Goddard tells her only he and Alfred, and then asks her if she has come up with something, and she tells him that there is only one thing she cannot understand, which is the timeline of the crime. And if the killer came from outside the palace, a total of 7 problems will appear. The first problem is why Hannah did not show any signs of waking up, and she was more sensitive to sound and smells than humans. It is strange that she did not pay attention to the attacker. The second problem is that the killer did not sneak up at night specifically, and even the children realize the vampire force is weakened during the day. The third problem is that the killer did not leave the holy water bottle at the crime scene, and he used that coat to avoid blood often flying on it. but it is easy for him to take the bottle with him. The fourth problem is, how did the killer know that the silver stake was in the storeroom? It is strange that he knew the exact location of Hannah's room and when she was likely to be asleep. The fifth problem is that the killer did not pull the silver stake after stabbing it and returning it to the store. After that, Mr. Goddard notices that his daughter Charlotte is standing, so they decide to discuss the last two problems later. After that, everyone sits down to eat, and Mr. Goddard's family drinks the blood of the animals they hunt. Then Aya says to Mr. Goddard that there are a few things I want you to tell me, and Mr. Goddard tells her what they are, and Aya tells him that on the night of Hannah's murder, his wife discovered the body after 1 o'clock. Shortly after midnight, did you have dinner at midnight that day? And Mr. Goddard says to her yes, with everyone in the palace. Then she asks him when he finished his meal, and he tells her he did it at 12:30. Then she asks him whatever Hannah has done yet. Finishing her meal, he tells her that she said she would go to rest in her room. Then he goes to his office to talk to his son Claude. After that, she asks him if any of them saw Hannah after dinner, and Mr. Goddard says that he was with Claude in the office talking. In running the town, Charlotte joined them and was playing with the dolls, and at 1 o'clock they left the office and parted at the entrance hall. And he says he goes out hunting every Monday at that hour, so he went to the store to get his rifle, and he did not see anything strange at that time. And a minute after he left the palace, Raoul said that he wanted to see the plants and went with him, and they were together all the time in the forest. Then he fired his rifle 3 shots, but he did not succeed in hitting the prey even once. After that you ask Aya, Claude, where did he go after he parted with Mr. Goddard? Claude says that he returned to his room and stayed alone, and left Charlotte with Giselle, and then asked Raoul what he would do it after dinner. But Raoul gets angry because whoever interrogates them and suspects them of Hannah's murder. And then Mr. Goddard asks her if she thinks someone killed Hannah, and she says whatever she thinks, and Mr. Goddard gets angry. But whoever insists on knowing what Raoul was doing, he says he was in his room the whole time. But it is impossible that he killed Hannah because he was with his father all the time in the forest. So she says that there is a time gap between Mr. Goddard leaving the palace and leaving it. And Raoul says despite the speed of vampires, it is impossible to commit a murder in a minute. And then she asks him if he hears strange sounds while he is staying in his room, and he tells her no, he did not hear anything. After that, she asks Giselle, where did she go, and what did she do after dinner at 12:30? And she says Giselle she cleaned the kitchen, and then went to the laundry room at 1 o'clock because that's what she does every day. And on her way she saw Charlotte, and she was bored. So she took her with her, and she was singing to her while she was doing the laundry. And she told her whatever that means, that she was with Charlotte all the time from 1 o'clock until the time the body was found. And Giselle tells her that she went to the bathroom once, but that only took a minute or two. And then she asks Charlotte if Giselle's words were true, and she answered yes. Then she moves to Alfred, and asks him what he was doing after dinner, and he tells her that he went down to the office in the basement where he was adjusting Mr. Goddard's schedule, and that he did nothing else. So she asks him if he heard any strange sounds at that time, and he tells her no, he did not hear anything, and she thanks them for answering her questions, and tells them that the people who did not have an alibi are Alfred and Claude. But the two object to her words and say that they did not commit that crime, and Mr. Goddard also objects and says it is impossible for Claude to kill his mother, and it cannot be the killer Alfred, and that he has been serving them for more than 20 years. But whatever she says, she explained it before, and that there are many factors that deny that someone from outside committed the crime. So Charlotte cries because of the talk and leaves them and goes, and the meeting ends because of that. The team wanders around the palace. Then she tells Shizuko to go to the 2 servants and watch them, and if one of them tries to escape, he stops him. Then they meet Claude on their way, and he tells them that he did not kill his mother so as not to waste time. Then he attacks Tsugaru and threatens him, leaves them, and goes. Then she asks Tsugaru, Aya, if she thinks Claude is the killer, and she says that she cannot say for sure, but his hands were clean and had no burn marks, and that she watched all the family's hands while eating. The food was all clean and without scratches or burns. Then we move to Shizuko, and she watches the 2 servants, and Alfred is on his way out of the room. But Shizuko stops him and tells them that she has been ordered to stay with them, and he tells her that he has work to do with Mr. Goddard. So Giselle says that Mr. Goddard went to the forest with Aya and Tsugaru. Then we move to the forest, and they are going to the place where the hunter attacked them before. But suddenly Mr. Goddard stands up and says to me what the fact that none of the palace residents may be the killer, and the way his wife was killed suggests that she is the act of a vampire hunter. And he asks her to investigate with a more logical approach. But whoever tells him that she investigates the most logical approach, of course, and that she only focuses on knowing the killer. And then Mr. Goddard says that he doesn't just want to lose more of his family, but they think he's talking about Hannah. But he says before he comes to this area, 3 members of his family were killed. And then he tells them since they are from Japan, they must have heard about the story of the undying beast. And Tsugaru says to him, Fuji, which is a word in Japanese means immortal. And he also says that he is unique. He looks human, but he never dies, does not age, does not get tired, and that he heard that he is about 1,000 years old. So Mr. Goddard says that his father told him that he is regenerating immediately, no matter how severe his injury is. And then she says that in fact there is only one way to kill the immortal, or rather a certain creature. And Mr. Goddard asks her what it is, and she says to him, Oni. In his language, he is called the devil or the ogre, and in Japan it means the servant of hell, and no monster can withstand the sweeping force resulting from the Oni cells, and the Oni can injure any creature, no matter how strong its renewal. So the Oni can kill the immortal. But this does not require that the Oni is the ultimate body of life, and gunshots or explosions can kill him easily. And humans hunted his species during the Great Cleansing and became extinct now. So Mr. Goddard says that she means herself, and Tsugaru laughs and says to me whoever caught them. But suddenly, an arrow pierces Mr. Goddard's neck. But Mr. Goddard easily removes the arrow, and his wound heals quickly. He says that he did not start attacking humans, but he will throw terror on the hearts of those who dare to oppose him, and chase the hunter who attacked him, and succeed in capturing him easily, and be on the verge of eliminating him. But Tsugaru and whoever intervenes and stops him, and Mr. Goddard believes that he was the one who killed his wife, for whom you say it is impossible that he did it, because that man seems to have arrived in town today, and there is soot on his elbow, and that is the result of resting his arm on a train window often. And it seems he spent many days traveling here from the German countryside. And Tsugaru actually finds a train ticket from East Berlin scheduled 3 days ago. So she tells Mr. Goddard that his wife was killed 3 days ago, and that is impossible that he did it while he was in East Berlin. And the fisherman tries to escape, but Tsugaru catches him, and the fisherman begs them to leave him and pardon him. So she says that she will pardon him if he answers her questions, and asks him what his name is, and he tells her that his name is Joseph, and then she asks him why he attacked Mr. Goddard, and he tells her to avenge his friend who was killed by Mr. Goddard. And Joseph is the friend of the fisherman with the silver stake who attacked Mr. Goddard before. Then she asks him if he knows that his friend is targeting Mr. Goddard, and he tells him that they talked about it 2 weeks ago, and he tries to deter him from doing so. But he says that he is confident, and he says that he got a strong collaborator. But he discovers that he was killed 3 days ago, and then she asks him if he knew that he had a silver dog. But he says that he did not know that it was silver because he always kept it in a leather bag. And then she says to Tsugaru to leave. He is released, but Mr. Goddard objects, and whatever reassures him and tells him that she is sure that he will not try to attack you again. Joseph runs quickly in fear, and then tells Mr. Goddard to return to the palace and to summon everyone there to close the curtain on this tragic and funny murder play. Then after they return to the palace, she says that Hannah's killer is among them, but Claude objects to her words. But Mr. Goddard tells him to sit down and hear what she is going to say. And then she says that after examining the crime scene, she has 7 problems, and we have mentioned 5 of them before. So we turn to the 6th problem, which is related to sound, which is that at the time of the crime, Claude and Mr. Alfred were close to Hannah's room, but they did not hear any sound from her. But Claude says that means the killer was cautious. She tells him that the killer stabbed Hannah in the chest with a silver stake at his maximum strength. So it is assumed that this made a loud sound similar to the sound of hammering a nail, and there are 4 explanations for that. The first, which is the lie of both witnesses, and this means that they conspired the crime. But whatever you say, neither of you has an alibi of absence, and if you conspire, you would provide a false alibi for each other. Secondly, there was a sound, but not when they were next to her room, which means the crime may have occurred before 1 after midnight. But Mr. Goddard tells her that he checks that nothing is missing in the store, and she tells him that she knows it, and then she says thirdly, what if the killer hits the steak with a hammer but puts a separator so that there is no sound, but there was a lot of blood on the killer's coat? And that's proof that there's nothing to obscure the bloodshed. The final explanation is that the killer held the steak with his bare hand and used force to plant it, so no one ever heard a sound. And then you ask Mr. Alfred what you would think if you heard a metal sauce sound from Hannah's room. He says that he would have expected that the lady was repairing the foundation. And then Claude asks the same question, and he answers the same answer as Alfred. And she says that whatever use of a hammer in this house, no one will find it. Something strange. Why didn't the killer use a hammer to plant the peg? The only explanation is not to smash the steak itself, which means that the murder weapon was not the silver steak, but a steak of another material, a thing so fragile that if you hit it with a hammer, it shatters. But Mr. Goddard says something like this can't kill my wife. So you say, let's move on to the 7th problem, which is the bottle that was left empty at the crime scene, which the killer took for a reason and left it there on purpose. And the important thing is that the bottle was dirty from the inside with dust, and if the bottle was filled with holy water from the inside, because it was impossible to get dirty, that means that the bottle was empty from the beginning. And to pretend that the killer sprayed holy water on the victim, he left it at the crime scene, but there were traces of holy water on the victim. So where did he come from? And what the victim was a vampire, and the deadly weapon made of something other than silver is holy water. The killer froze the holy water and made a steak out of ice and took it to the palace, then stabbed Mrs. Hannah in her sleep on the chair, then obscured the coat he was wearing with flying blood, then soon melted the icy holy water steak from the high heat, and the holy water that melted is what caused those burns. After the crime, the killer collected Hannah's blood in a bottle and then left the coat that he no longer needed, then waited for Mr. Goddard to go hunting, broke the lock on the warehouse door, and sneaked inside. Then he poured blood on the silver steak so that it seems to be the weapon of crime. But one problem remains, which is why the killer used that trick, and the reason is to make an excuse of absence. So Mr. Goddard thought that the crime occurred while he was leaving to hunt between 1 am and 1:30 am. But if the silver steak is not the weapon of crime, it will be possible for the crime to occur between 12:30 am and 1 am. And from this information, there are 5 conditions that the killer must meet. The first, he must have an argument of absence for the actual period of the crime. The second, he must be a person who has been excluded from the ability to commit the crime because of his absence argument equipped from 1 am to 1:30 am. The third, he must have a few minutes to move freely. The fourth, he must be strong enough to stab someone with a thick pot and break the lock. The fifth, he must be skilled enough to commit the crime without the vampires noticing him despite their sharp senses. And the one who meets all these conditions is Raul. But Raul objects to Aya's words and says that he can't touch the silver. So Aya say there are blood fingerprints on the silver steak. And most likely you caught him with an automatic reaction when you were covering him with Hannah's blood. But if you are the criminal, your hand must be burned. But because of the vampire's ability to regenerate, so you took one of the hanging swords, and you cut off your fingers. And so I was able to remove the burn marks. But suddenly Raul attacks Aya. But Tsugaru, he stops him with ease, then leaves Aya with Shizuko, throws him out of the palace, then goes out behind him to punish him and Aya a compliment to her explanation of the murder, and says that he communicated with the hunter who attacked them before, and the purpose was to make the steak of that hunter in the palace store until he carries out his crime. And since you all go to church, it is easy for him to find holy water, and the motive is his objection to the alliance of human beings. Mr. Goddard collapses because of what he hears, and that the one who killed his wife is his son, and he does not know what to do. So she tells him to leave it to Tsugaru. And at the same time, Tsugaru takes off his jumps and shoes, and Raul is very angry. So he attacks with all his strength on Tsugaru. But he avoids his attack and hits him hard. And Raul is surprised that his wounds do not heal, and Tsugaru speaks as if he was in one of the shows he was giving, and Raul is surprised by what he's doing. But he gets angry and attacks him. But Tsugaru confronts him and hits him again, and the fighting continues between them. Tsugaru keeps beating Raul and mocking him, and we return to Mr. Goddard, who regrets what he did and what brought him to where he is. Then Tsugaru comes and says that he finished his work and Raul is gone. Then she says their work is done. Then she and her team leave. And when they go out, they meet the journalist girl. And she is surprised that they solved the case in one night. And she asks them about the details of the case. Then she chases Shizuko Tsugaru because she orders her to beat him. Then Aya and Mr. Goddard are talking, and she asked him if he knows a man in his 70s with a black stick engraved with the letter M engraved. And Mr. Goddard says that man visited him a few days ago, and he did not tell him his name but asked him to call him the professor, and asked him to go with him to London. But he refused because he has a family, and then asked her how she knows him, and she tells him that he is the fool who stole her body. After that, everyone meets and leaves the palace.
If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click on the like and write your opinion in the comments.